Well, good evening. Welcome to Book Passage. Thank you for all coming out and on a Wednesday night and supporting your local independent bookstore. We really appreciate you making the choice to be here tonight. My name is Melissa Sestaro, and I have the honor and privilege of being in conversation with the fantastic Jason Mott, who has just published his first novel, The Returned. You might want to know that The Return has recently found a spot on the New York Times bestseller list, and it was optioned by Brad Pitt's production company, and the series premiere will air this March on the ABC network under the title Resurrection. Jason is not a newcomer to writing. He is an award-winning poet, a short story writer, and was nominated for a Pushcart Prize. He has published 2 poetry collections, and now he's written this beautiful, captivating story that begins with Harold and Lucille Hargrave and the appearance of their 8-year-old son, Jacob, who drowned 50 years previously on his 8th birthday. Jacob is one of the returned, people who are returning from the grave, and no one knows why or how this is happening, and if it's a blessing or a curse. So, Jason, welcome to Book Passage. There are so many questions I have for you about this book, as with any great book, but I want to start with just a simple question about your inspiration for this story.
Sure thing. Excuse me. Both of my parents have passed away, my mother in 2001, my father in 2007. And in the summer of 2010, I had this dream that I came home from work and found my mother sitting at the kitchen table waiting for me. And so I came in and sat with her, and for what seemed like hours, we just sat and talked about everything that had happened in the years since she passed away. I talked about these new friends that I had met, going to college, trying to be a writer. She gave me a hard time for not being married, because that's what your mom's supposed to do. And it was this really warm, cathartic dream where for the first time in almost a decade, I was with my mother again. And I woke up the next day really and truly expecting to find her sitting at the table still. And the dream followed me for weeks, just couldn't get out of my head. And I was discussing it with a friend, and at some point in the conversation, he said, wouldn't it be amazing if that actually happened, and what if it wasn't just her? And that's really where the project started. I wrote a short story based around this principle of an older couple whose son returned, and I read it at a reading and people responded really strongly to it, and I worked on a manuscript, and it's kind of been going forward ever since.
Great, and I have a question about the date, August 15th, 1966.
Okay.
Does that date have a personal connection for you?
The year itself doesn't. August 15th is my
It's
nephew's...
the day of Jacob's death.
Yes, exactly.
Yes. Okay.
The day of Jacob's death. And it's actually my nephew's birthday.
Okay.
I've got a nephew who, when my mother passed away, I kind of became my nephew's father in a very real sense. He lived with me, and I took care of him from that point forward. He became a huge part of my life. Like, he's in the military now, doing great, married. But he was kind of my son for a very long time. So I wanted to kind of, put a little Easter egg in there. The book is full of Easter eggs for friends and family members.
That's
So that was
great.
one that I wanted to kind of include for him, to have that date be really significant.
That's great. Yeah, I just every time I heard it, I was like,
No, that's a
something
great
here.
question.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about the journey that you've been on with this book. It's a story that I think is really inspiring for all the good things that have been going on for readers and writers to hear about.
Cool, sure. It's been a wonderful journey. The last year has been the most life-changing year that I think a person can ever have. Short of like winning the lottery, which this kind of feels like, quite frankly. A year ago, May of last year, I was working at Verizon Wireless answering phone calls for angry New Yorkers. Because we were in North Carolina, but we handled specifically New York Metro. So if someone in New York's phone broke and they called customer service to yell at them, I was the person who get yelled at for 40 hours a week for 4 years. And so I was working there, but I was writing the entire time. The 2 poetry books I got published while I was there, but you're never going to quit your job for poetry. That's just the honest truth. I love poetry, but it's never going to pay a bill. But I kept writing because writing is what I do, and I can't not write. And so the entire time I was working there, so I finished the manuscript, and I sent out query letters to agents, not expecting anything to happen. And all of a sudden, I got an agent who was kind of interested in it. There's a courtship that happened with the agents, and I didn't know about this. And so she actually said, okay, there's two things we got to talk about. First of all, your title sucks, which at that time the title was pretty bad.
You can say.
Yeah, no, I can totally say. The original title was that?
The Resurrection.
No, that's been used before. No, the TV series went that way. The title for the book was Alive in Arcadia. That was the original title, which I think is still a good title. But the Returned is a much better title. I'll readily admit that. And she also said the last 4 chapters have to be completely overhauled. That definitely hurt. Like I flinched pretty seriously behind that because my artist, I changed my art for anybody. And so I spent some time thinking about it, and I finally decided, okay, we'll give it a shot. She's professional. She must know what she's talking about. And so I made some changes, and that they worked really well. So I got that. And so we spent time working on the manuscript, and at the same time working at Verizon, just still hating it every day, just praying, fingers crossed, and to get out of this job. And as a side note, if you ever call customer service, be nice. Like, that job was so bad. It's just because people call in looking for fights. Like even if they're in the wrong, they call in wanting to fight you about stuff that you have no control over. My bill is 2 cents higher. What's going on? And they want an hour-long argument over 2 cents, and I'm deadly serious about that. That 2 cent change is an hour-long discussion. So please don't do that to people. So I was working there, and so there are buying seasons in publishing, which I didn't know. Manuscripts are usually bought in spring and fall. So we spent all winter preparing for the spring buying season, working on the manuscript. So we sent it out on a Thursday, sent it to all these different editors at all these different publishing houses. And so I spent all weekend just freaking out, having panic attacks, getting drunk, because that's what you do when your manuscript's out there in the world and you wait to see what happens. And so my agent has said it may happen quickly, it may happen slowly, it may never happen at all, you just never know. And so that Monday I was at work and my agent calls, and it surprised me that she called because I hate talking on the phone because I worked at Verizon for 4 years. And she knows I hate talking. Like I will watch, if someone calls me, I will literally watch it ring and then text them back going, hey, did you just call me? What's going on? I'm that guy. I hate talking on the phone. It's like a punishment to me talking on the phone. So when she called, I knew something was up. So I went on break and I called her back. And she goes, are you sitting down? I said, no. She goes, sit down for a moment, we need to talk. So I sat down. And she goes, we have a preemptive offer from Harlequin. And my first response was, do they know it's not a romance novel? They really read the manuscripts. And she said, yeah. So there's an imprint called Harlequin Mirror, whose job it is to do non-romance fiction. And they really liked the manuscripts. Apparently they got it that Thursday. My editor read it on Friday, sent it to her boss on Saturday, who sent it to her boss on Sunday. They had an emergency meeting Sunday evening. Like they were just really over the moon about the manuscript, which is awesome. You want that if you're a writer. And so she told me like how much the offer was, and it wasn't enough to get rich, but it was enough to quit your job, which is really all you really want out of life. It's just enough to quit your job. And so and it's funny because she told me specifically, she says, don't quit your job. She totally saw it coming, like she knew what was going on. She goes, don't quit your job, because we hadn't accepted the deal yet. There was still stuff to iron out. There were like other people interested, so like nothing was set in stone. They could have backed out at any moment. And more than that, she goes, even if we accept the offer, it takes sometimes up to 6 months for the check to arrive. So just don't quit your job. I go, yeah, sure, okay, cool. We hung the phone up, I go straight to my supervisor's desk. Like didn't stop at my desk, I left stuff there and everything. So I go to my supervisor and I said, hey, I'm going home. And he goes, what's going on? Is it like an emergency or what's happening? I said, you can do what you need to do right now, but I'm going home. I just walked out the door. So I hadn't actually quit though, like I just walked out, which is pretty close to quitting. So that Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, I took vacation days and did phone calls with editors and basically got everything sorted out. And I got paid vacation, which is even better. And so Thursday we made the deal with Harlequin. And again, my agent was saying, don't quit your job. There's still stuff to do, and it'll be a long time for the check shows out. I was like, okay, cool. I had a little bit of savings. It's like not enough really, but it's like, hey, what the hell? So I show up for work, and when I say I did not like that job, you have to understand I did not like that job. Like I had fantasies of like just driving up and seeing the building on fire. Like, no one's hurt in the fire. No one is hurt in the fire. It's an empty building that just burns down for like a month, and I sit at home for a month and watch TV before I go back to work. That was my vision of that job. So I walk into the building, just not sure if I was going to quit, because I'm a really responsible guy. Like I'm the guy that doesn't do anything without a plan. So quitting my job was a very dramatic thing. And I was going to my desk, still not sure if I would actually quit. And it was when I actually saw my desk and like something in my brain actually said, you don't have to do that if you don't want to do it. And that was really all I needed. I just took a right turn. And I go to my boss and I said, hey, today is my last day. And they were like, what do you mean today? I was like, today is my last day. There's no other way to say it. I can say it in French, in Spanish, it's gonna mean the same thing. I'm just not coming back ever again. So we did the exit interview, and I couldn't tell them why I was quitting, which was so much fun because it was just being coy the whole time. And then I walked out of the building at 10:13 after arriving at 10 a.m. and walked out at 10:13 and have not been back. And it feels just as good as you think it does. It really does. So that was a lot of fun. And ever since then, it's been a whirlwind. A month later, the television people, I got an email from the film rights agent who had taken the project, and he said, hey, ABC, NBC, Fox, and one film studio are all interested in your project. It was like, whoa, that's completely amazing. And so we talked to a few people, decided to go with Plan B, which is Brad Pitt's film company. I have not met Brad Pitt. I see the question out there, I see it in your eyes. I know it's coming. Have not met Brad Pitt. Would love to meet him. Would love to meet his wife even more. We'll see how that goes. And so we decided to go with Plan B. And things get optioned a lot for those who don't know much about like publishing and stuff. Book options happen very frequently, and they rarely go anywhere because usually what happens is if a film studio has a project that's similar to your book, they'll option your book, push their film project through, and then give your option back and never do anything with it because they just wanted it to not compete with their project. Or the alternative is World War Z, which is Plan B's latest project, just came out this year. That was 8 years from option to film. So I was expecting, okay, maybe a decade from now, if I'm really lucky, something can happen with all this optioning stuff. And so that was in July of just last year. And late August, I got an email saying, hey, they've got a writer attached to the program. And I was like, okay, cool, but that happens a lot, never goes anywhere. Then a month later, they had a director, and it's like, okay, that's cool, but again, that rarely goes anywhere. Then a month after that, they were casting, and that's when things got really serious, because once casting starts, they're gonna actually do something with it. So they cast over the winter. In spring, they shot a pilot in Atlanta. And in May, it went before the network execs. And I found out something about television. Everything that you watch on television, the entire lineup, is decided by one person, which completely blew my mind to smithereens. The whole pitch season, which is where everyone that wants to pitch a show, there's literally like 150 shows that go before pitches for networks every season. And there's one exec who sits in a room for like 2 weeks and watches all the pitches, all the pilots, and then decides from just this one person's perspective whether or not to accept these shows and what to do with them. And that still just blows me away to no end. And so it made for a very exciting and weird 2 weeks because at the end of the night, every night, there's a website called Deadline, which focuses on like Hollywood. They would post all the shows that got cut. So it's kind of like watching like a basketball tournament. Like every night you could go on and see like stuff getting knocked out the brackets. Like, oh, this show's not making it, this are out, this one's out. And it was just like, so every night you're just chewing your nails, waiting on like 10:30 to come to watch to see what teams made it. And you could watch like Joss Whedon's show, like just going up through the ranks. Like, yeah, Joss Whedon's okay, he'll be in there. And so we had like, every day it was like the show hadn't got kicked out yet. That was the only thing that we wanted. It's like, okay, we're not on the list. And then finally, the final day, which was like a Saturday, at like 10:48 or something like that, the announcement came that they picked up the show, and it was actually the favorite of the exec at ABC's. So I went downtown to party. Because that's what you do. Your book gets picked up by ABC. You go downtown to party. And so that was May of this year. Like they're in Atlanta right now filming. And the book launch at the debut.
You can see a trailer online.
Yeah, the trailer's online. The TV show is called Resurrection. You can go online and Google it. It looks absolutely amazing. I got to see the pilot. The pilot is phenomenal. Great actors, great writing. The pilot is essentially the first couple of chapters of the book, so I love that. Now the book is out in 13 or 14 countries, thanks to this couple here's daughter, who's in charge of kind of international rights. So it's been an amazing year, quite frankly. It goes from answering phones to being on a book tour.
Congratulations, that is fantastic. So about the television show, so I noticed that they have changed some of the names and some details. Now, how does that feel? Like, I know you don't have a lot of control over it. Are you feeling like, I don't care, or are you feeling a little sensitive about when you see?
No, I'm totally okay with that, actually.
Yeah.
Because in my mindset, once you write something, no matter what it is, and once it's published, it's no longer yours, and it doesn't really matter what it is. But once it's published, you don't own it anymore. The reader owns it, the critics own it, the culture at large owns the product. Which is why me and George Lucas don't get along, because he thinks he still owns Star Wars. It's like, you don't own Star Wars. People, so stop redoing your movies. But that's a whole other topic. And so for me, with the television series, I'm not a network exec. I'm not a casting director. Any of those things you need to make a good show. So we just tried to choose wisely when we chose someone to be the shepherd, the steward of the show. And they're doing a great job. The cast is amazing. They did a great job casting it. I got to meet everyone and hang out, which is pretty surreal and awesome. They're all wonderful people. The showrunner actually worked on The Killing on AMC. His name is Aaron Zellman. He did a great job writing for that show. One of the writers they just brought in to do an episode of the show was just nominated for an Emmy for Breaking Bad. So they're bringing in like really quality people to do the show. People that are way better at television writing than I ever could be. So I have no desire to kind of step on their toes and get in the way. So yeah, I don't have any problem with them. Like the changes they're making are really good, and I think they're doing some really fun stuff with it. It'll be just enough of the book to have readers excited, and just something new to where people that come to discover it just as a show will enjoy it as well.
Cool. Are you hoping for a little cameo, maybe?
I got a face for radio. I would love to be the guy on the phone. Like if a character calls someone, and you just hear the audio coming through. I would love to do that. Like I need to actually email someone. It's like I'd be the guy on the phone, and at the end of the credits, it'd be like guy on the phone, Jason Mott. That'd be just awesome. That's really all I want for the show, just to be the guy on the phone.
Put that out there.
Exactly.
So tell us about your poetry. I understand we talked a little bit about sometimes it's called comic book poetry, kind of a new genre. So
sure.
Tell me about that. It sounds fascinating.
Yeah, I grew up reading a lot of comic books. It's just like it's a lot of kids do. I really fell in love with the whole because I grew up initially reading large heroic tales, Beowulf, the Odyssey, the Iliad, things like that. And then when I kind of ran out of those, comic books which are the descendants of those same exact stories, filled the gap. So I fell in love with comic books in that same kind of vein of just these epic stories. And when my father, after my mother passed, back in 2001, in 2006, my father got diagnosed with cancer, pretty progressive. He was having a bunch of other health issues as well, and then that was kind of the icing on the cake. And the doctors gave us like a year prognosis, like, okay, a year from now, how much are you going to get? And so all of a sudden, and I didn't know why, but all of a sudden, I got really back into comic books in a way I hadn't in years. I would go to the store and just buy them in bulk and just go home and just sit and read. And I was in grad school at the time, so I was working and just had a life going on, but I became really obsessed with comics again and couldn't figure out why. And then later on I figured out, and then my father actually passed, and after he passed I started working, I started writing superhero poetry and just couldn't figure out why. And the characters were always like Batman getting killed, and like it was really dark, morbid kind of stuff. And at some point, my thesis advisor, he said that you're really talking about your father's death, and I hadn't even considered that. And I realized then that the comic books that I went back to were my coping mechanism for watching my father pass away. And so the collection became this collection in a vein of epic poetry, of kind of me using comics as the shield to kind of get through my father's actual passing, kind of using them to help me. Because what is the death of a parent except the death of a hero? That's really all it ever can be. And so I worked through a lot of that there, and I discovered a lot of other poets who are actually working in superheroes right now, which is kind of unique. There's a great poet named Brian Dietrich who wrote a collection about Superman, was nominated for a Pulitzer. So I found out I'm not alone with that. Like comic books have they've grown up, which is a great thing to kind of sit and watch. And so for me, it's fun to work in that area because the roots of comics, even though comics get tossed away as being pop culture and kind of stuff for for kids and for geeks and all that kind of stuff, whatever name you want to use, at the end of the day, comic books are just stories about justice and our social aspect, our social perceptions of justice. And I think that when you study it from that angle, it becomes very illuminating in how we kind of treat things and why certain characters are popular while other characters are not popular. You start to get a bit of an analysis on human behavior and society in general. I could go on for like a long time about like how comics correlate to certain movements in society and how we've changed dramatically based upon the heroes that have come after those changes. But I think another discussion.
You got a lot of passion.
Yeah,
that's
I'm a
great.
huge geek, and more than that, I'm a huge fan of just mythology and the role that it plays in the human condition as a whole. And the two run much more closely together than people ever really kind of consider.
And there's a lot of that mythic tie-in.
Yes, definitely. Lots of it there, and other projects as well.
I was thinking about that element of magical realism in fiction, which is one of the facets of your story. And I was telling Calvin this story actually about my 4.5-year-old. I got to tell this story real quick because it ties in to the realm of your story. So we had a dog that passed away, died years ago, and her name was Crystal. And so the other day we're walking in Safeway past the pet food aisle, and my son says, "Mama," he says, "what if heaven gets too full and Crystal falls out?" You know, which is such, you know, I mean,
Yeah.
it's and that idea. And he says, you know, we need to get her this dog food, and I think that that kind of magical thinking
Yeah.
that children have that we need, and I think you so beautifully dive into that
Well, thank you.
in this book. One of my absolute favorite sentences in the book, one of many, is from Tatiana.
Okay.
And she says, "Death is only the beginning of the reunion you did not know you wanted." Can you talk about that beautiful line? Give me.
Sure. Yeah, I'm a big fan of the Tatiana storyline, which is why she got the prequels that came out.
Oh,
For those that
yeah.
don't know, there are 3 prequels that are available electronically through Kindle, Kobo, and they're completely free to download. So please go home and get them. And it focuses on this character Tatiana, who only shows up for like 2 pages in the book.
That is powerful. Yeah.
Because she's a child who has that magical thinking, and who just loves her family, and I kind of wanted to use her. 'Cause I think children are able to kind of see things before the institutions get built up later on. You know, as we grow older, you're trained on how to think about certain things, and which can be good. I mean, it helps you get through life in very many aspects, but it also desensitizes you to a lot of things that you really could be thinking. It could be perspectives that you miss any other way. And children have that wonderful gift of not having been indoctrinated all the way yet. So when they make a statement, they're oftentimes able to do it from a much truer place. And I kind of wanted Tatiana to be that voice. And I've got wonderful nieces who I kind of patterned Tatiana after a little bit, who ask those kinds of wonderful questions, and it's just a really, really fun thing to do.
Yeah. Great. Super. I also want to make sure that we open it up to anyone who has a question for Jason. And one thing I wanted to, since you've been on book tour, have you had any interesting exchanges with people sharing, I would imagine people coming forward and sharing stories about their loved ones passing, or does that kind of come into play?
It does actually, and that's been the most surprising aspect of it. When I was writing the book, I didn't expect anything, quite frankly. I expected to be at Verizon still answering phones right now. Because this is maybe my 5th manuscript. There's a story of like every overnight success takes a decade to happen. And I completely subscribe to that. This is probably my 5th or 6th manuscript. It's the first one to ever go anywhere. All the others, I submitted query letters and agents wouldn't touch it, and I totally get why. They're horrible books, so greatly admit that. There's maybe 2 that I could salvage, but the other 4 are just train wrecks, and I'm going to burn them one day and just hope that no one ever finds them. And so I think it's interesting to see people will read the book, and about 3 days after the book was out, when it started, I started getting emails from people who had read the book, and they would just tell these really personal stories about loss or about dreams they had of people who had come back to them, and ghost stories, and just really intimate personal details about how the book made them remember a parent or a child or a sibling or whomever it was. And I think that's been the most magical thing that I hadn't really considered as being a possibility of all this, the idea that every writer, I think, hopes to make a connection with someone on any level, and to have people really opening up to what is essentially a complete stranger, which is what I am, but to open up on a very personal, heartfelt level. It's just been something, an added bonus that just kind of outweighs everything else. It's been absolutely awesome. So that's been just so much fun.
That's wonderful. Questions? Well, let's open it up here.
Well, this is your 5th manuscript, and you didn't think the others were worthy. How difficult or easy was it to write this?
Oh, it was brutal. It was absolutely brutal. I think every manuscript is brutal. Because for me, at least, writing goes in 3 phases. The initial draft is always the best thing ever. Like, I love it. Oh, I'm sitting here, this is going to be the greatest book in human history. As you're going through the first draft. And then somewhere around the revision, when you start revision, is usually when the pain starts. Because when you start revising, you start to realize just how horrible that first draft actually is. And so it goes completely in the opposite direction. to where you just feel like you're the worst writer in human history and you should just quit. Like every sentence is absolutely stale and doesn't make sense, and the characters aren't making any sense, and it eventually reflects onto not only your writing but your own personal. It just goes down this deep rabbit hole of failure and it's self-doubt and loathing, where you start to feel like, oh, that's why I'm single, because I'm a bad writer, because it's just like your brain goes everywhere. So you go through that horrible phase, which is just it lasts for months. Like my friends don't want to be around me because I'm miserable for months. They're like, you must be writing right now. Actually, yeah, I am. And then somewhere around the end, like after that phase ends, you kind of come to like somewhere in the middle, where you start to realize, okay, I've got a manuscript. It's probably not the best in the world. It's probably not the worst in the world. It is what it is, and we just kind of put it out there and see where it goes. So this manuscript was very personal, obviously, because it centers around the idea of loss. And there's a character, Agent Bellamy, who comes into the manuscript, who's essentially my proxy character. There's a story of him and this woman who thinks may or may not be his mother, which is essentially me writing about my mother. But I didn't want to make him the central character. I didn't want to do. One of my mentors in writing, a wonderful writer named Philip Gerard, he said the worst thing a writer can do is turn a reader into a therapist. And I didn't want to do that. So I made the Agent Bellamy story a very secondary story and kind of let the other characters do their thing. But it was a very personal, very hard manuscript to write at times, which is why the success of it has been even more rewarding. But it's a case where even if it had gone nowhere, I still would be just as proud of it. I think every writer, even the manuscripts I hate, I'm kind of proud of because they kind of got me here and they helped me through something at some point in my life. So even if it had never gone anywhere, I'd still be writing. Next question? No.
Everything going just on the internet, a lot of bloggers are doing that right on the internet rather than.
You mean like self-publishing?
Yeah.
I've thought of it, but it's such a hard, cluttered field. Publishing in general is extremely cluttered right now, and self-publishing has something to do with that. Because of the fact that now anyone can write and you just post it and your book is out there. And the problem with that is, it's weird how self-publishing kind of sparked and kind of grew because everyone was trying to get away from the main publishing houses, away from the gatekeepers and all those people who they felt were blocking their success. And there may be some truth to that in very many cases. And so self-publishing became the venue where you could just, anyone could write and put their thing out there and not have to go through the gates. And so more and more people started doing it. But the backlash of that is becoming that there's so many books being published now that the people who stand out are the ones who are actually going through main publishers. Because now you've got marketing people behind you, you've got distribution channels behind you, you've got a support structure, unlike the 17 million other people who don't have support structure who self-published. So for right now, I kind of avoided self-publishing the whole time, and even going forward, I still don't see, self-publishing wouldn't be my first choice. If there's something that I'm really passionate about, and I can't find any publisher anywhere to want to do it, and I'm still as passionate about it, maybe. But for right now, I would much more rather stick with traditional publishing, just because I know a lot of self-publishing people, and poetry is very akin to self-publishing. That's just the honest to God truth. The press that I published through was a very small press in North Carolina. All the marketing I had to do, all the publicity I had to do, I had to set up all the readings. There were readings where it was just me and the bookstore owner, which I totally am okay with. And you kind of have to go through all that. And now with the publisher, it's great to have someone else that you can call for help, someone else to help set up readings, and it's cool to have a support structure. So I'm a big fan of traditional publishing right now.
And you have a great success story.
What was the TV series going to be called again? I think I missed that.
No, sure. The TV series will be titled Resurrection. It's set to air March 9th of next year, March 9th on ABC at 10 p.m., which is actually a really good, strong vote of confidence, because mid-season launches actually do better than, usually better than fall season launches. The logic makes sense. The logic is, if your show comes out in fall, you're competing against all the other new shows, all the shows that are coming back. Breaking Bad is back, The Walking Dead is back, Justified is back, all these scandals back on. So you get lost in the shuffle. Whereas if you wait until mid-season, everything is on hiatus. All the big shows have run their course. Breaking Bad is gone, Walking Dead is off the air for a while, Justified is done, and people are looking for something to watch, and you become that new thing that's out there to watch. And so the last time ABC did it was with Scandal, and now Scandal is one of the biggest shows. And before that, they did it with Grey's Anatomy. That show took off well. So fingers are all crossed that the show does the same thing.
Why did they change the title?
I have no idea. That's one of those things where I actually found out at the same time everyone else found out. The night they announced that the show was being picked up, they were like, okay, also picked up Resurrection, formerly called The Return. And I was like, oh, well, there's that. So that was when I found out at the same time everyone else found out. There are certain things for the show where I get inside information on. There are certain things where I find out at the time everyone else does. The hierarchy of television is very interesting. The production company kind of sits here, and they're really open, very fluid in the conversation. They let me know a lot of what's going on. But then the network execs sit above the production company, and they can make a change without consulting the production company. I think that's kind of what happened to the title. Because the production company probably would have let me know. Because we talked about it beforehand, and they were saying that, ABC was thinking about changing the title, they're having suggestions. We kicked around a few ideas, but nothing really caught that we really were excited about. And so then all of a sudden, the announcement came that the title had been changed. So it wouldn't surprise me if this one exec at ABC just said, no, we're going to call it Resurrection and move on. That's actually how it happens. Nate, you had a question?
I'm sorry, any idea what you're up against? What other shows, or is it too soon to say?
I have no idea. I have no idea what else is on. I know we're not fighting Joss Whedon. That's the only thing I'm glad about. And we're not fighting the Olympics. They're going to wait till the Olympics for them on ABC. So it's a very strategic move. I don't know what else we're fighting. But I do know that the show is getting a lot of buzz. Earlier, people that have seen the pilots, because they're reviewers that kind of watch pilots, they all kind of gave Resurrection like their top 10 list, gave it high marks. So I think we're kind of off to a good start. And then hopefully readers who found the book will kind of gravitate to the show, which will even help promote that first episode even better. So that's the hope.
On the TV show, do you have a role in that other than having been the author? Like
No.
other ideas?
Not really. Like initially there was a lot of phone calls and conversations. I did some consulting very early on about, what were you thinking about this character and what about this open-ended question that you didn't really answer. So we did a bunch of that early on. And then I had another manuscript to do with my publisher. They were kind of getting their writers together, so we kind of parted ways to where they went down their own path, and I was working on the manuscript. And from that point forward, it's kind of been them doing their thing.
You're working on another manuscript?
Yes, I just turned in another manuscript, actually. The last year has been busy for that reason as well. Just turned in a new manuscript to my editor. She's been revising it on a book tour, so once the book tour ends, I go back and start working on that for the next few months. I've also got a screenplay I'm toying around with. I'm not sure if it's good or not. I'm a huge movie buff, like a dramatic, huge movie buff. So I would love to kind of get into the conversation of film by doing a screenplay at some point, so see how that goes.
Is the new manuscript along the same lines as The Return, or is it totally different?
It's another magical realism story. I like to think of it as an echo of The Returned. It's definitely a completely different story. It's another small town where something unique has happened, and there's a lot of things that happen there. But I will say, and I don't want to try to say this to be offensive to anyone, because I'm waiting to see what my editor actually says about the manuscript. Because in The Returned, I stayed very far away from religion. Being in the South, I think people who have read it or have come to it will find that there's religion from a writing standpoint. It's like you don't see the author making many comments about religion or anything like that. The new manuscript is very deeply rooted in religion. And it's got a lot to do. It's a huge conversation about religion. Is really what the new manuscript is. And some people get really upset when you say that because they feel like you're going to say something offensive about their religion, and it's not the goal. The new manuscript does not insult religion at all. It just takes it and looks at it from a lot of different angles. And so I'm waiting to hear what my editor says about it. She hasn't emailed me and said, God, no, this is terrible yet. So that's usually a good sign. But so to me, it'll be kind of an inversion of The Return to a certain extent, where some of the elements that were neglected or just not delved into in The Return will be much more delved into in the new project. So they kind of echo one another, in my opinion. Cool. Next question.
Who's your favorite superhero?
It's like the impossible question. You kind of have to give it to Batman, because Batman's the guy who you do. And Batman's the guy who, if you try hard enough, you can be Batman. That's why everyone likes Batman. Superman is also a really big character because he's invulnerable. There's a certain distance there he can never really cross. So yeah, Batman's always my favorite character. Wolverine's another good character, but Batman is definitely the cat's meow for me. So cool. But you had a question?
Do you have any personal attachment to the fact that they changed the name
No,
Doesn't-
because the name had already been changed one time. Like they're not calling it Live in Arcadia. So it's like I'd already been, bore the brunt of like one name change. So what's another name change at this point? But plus, like for me, I don't really get too attached to titles because I struggle with titles a lot. I feel. So if an agent or an editor or a publisher, someone says, sorry, the new title's got to go, I'm usually okay with it. The new manuscript, we've actually got a title for, which I'm not sure if I can tell people. So we'll see how that goes. But even that went through, like my editor came up with the title. Like I tried several times and they were just like, nope, it's horrible, it's a terrible title. They finally, my editor came up with a great title for it. So that's where we're I suck at titles, so I'm okay with them changing it. Yes?
You may not even know the answer to this, but when they option a book,
Mm-hmm.
does the author ever have any rights at all? Is it a choice? Do they give you options? If you were, Stephen King, would you be able to say no? I want control.
Great
How does
question.
that work?
That's a great question, actually. Yeah, it actually varies. It varies based upon what the author wants, how much they want to fight for. Like I could have completely fought to get executive producer, fought to write X number of episodes. Like you can fight whatever battles you want to fight. And depending on where you are in the hierarchy of writers, Stephen King can say, okay, it's going to be my way, my show, I direct it, I do everything, or else, and they'll go along with it. I'm on the other end of the spectrum, first time debut author, no clout whatsoever, but they didn't want the project. So honestly, if I had fought for certain things, I probably could have gotten them. But for me, it wasn't a case where I didn't really want to do it. I just had other stuff I wanted to kind of work on. But yeah, it really varies. I got to meet the author of Longmire, the Longmire series, and the television show, and him and I had a discussion about it because he's actually somewhere in the middle. When they optioned his book, he basically kind of worked it out that he would be able to kind of view the manuscripts and not have final say on the scripts, but have input. And it's kind of grown to where they send the manuscript to him for like final approval almost now because he's become a vital part of the show. But he fought for that in the contract. So you can kind of pick and choose as an author which battles you want to fight, and that will dramatically influence whether or not you think your manuscript gets optioned or what. But for me, it wasn't something I wanted to do, so I was willing to let them do it. Even this next manuscript, if someone decides they want to option it, I have no real desire to fight for anything in it. Because if I'm going to do television or movie, I would rather just do a screenplay, which is my goal. So I would rather just write a pure screenplay and work on that. But yeah, it varies. You can fight and get things.
Your agent did the fighting?
Yes.
Do you get a new agent when they want to option you for TRI? Book agents and television agents, different species?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yep, they are. When my agent sent the book out to publishers, she sent a copy to a film rights agent who she's worked with before, who's really good at handling book to movie translations. And he's a wonderful guy, and he's the one who actually did all the fighting. And when we were vetting the offers, because like I said, there were different networks, and some of the shady kind of backdoor stuff that happens. There was one network, and I won't say which network it is, but they specifically were trying to get the manuscript, get the rights, just so they could put it on a shelf and not show it, because they didn't want the other networks to have it. So they were trying to get it specifically to block it. And he told me, he's like, don't go this route, but they're really not. This is what they're trying to do, and he was really good at kind of fighting that battle and persuading things to happen. And there were other things as well where he was just really good at fighting certain battles for me. So yeah, film rights agents and book agents tend to be separate breeds, just because they have to be. Yeah.
Do you find yourself hanging around the set of your show, like how Leonard did with Justified, or you just kind of stay?
No, I've got pretty much like an open door for the filming. I've been down there maybe 3 times now. So I went and watched the pilot when they were filming that, and then I went not long after for some more filming. I went down on the book tour, just hung out with cast for a couple of days. Got to hang out at Francis Fisher's house, which is awesome. And it's just, yeah, they're really open. Like it's an open door. Like I can kind of go down whenever I want to. I live in North Carolina, which is like 6-hour drive away. So sometimes if I decide to drive down there, the producers are open to it, the directors are open to it, the cast loves it. So yeah, it's pretty cool. My goal is maybe if it goes for like 2 or 3 seasons, I would love to write an episode, maybe like 1 episode here, 1 episode there. But I never want to be a showrunner. Like I never want to run an entire show, because that's a whole different skill set, a whole different thing to do. But I wouldn't mind doing like a couple episodes.
And just Batman question. Grant Morrison or Frank Miller?
Frank Miller.
Okay.
Yeah, Frank Miller. Yeah, Grant Morrison, dude, that dude. No, Frank Miller revolutionized Batman, and no one can ever take that away from him. A lot of people don't really know that. Like the version of Batman that you all know and love from movies now is all because of Frank Miller, like 100% because of Frank Miller, which is a whole other just comic book geek discussion, which I'm totally up for doing. But yes.
General, I mean, how did you come to writing? What drove you to want to tell your stories and
Sure.
do your...
Yeah, it started with, like I say, John Gardner's to blame for all of it, honestly. When I was younger, like I said, I read Beowulf, the Odyssey, the Iliad, things like that, and really fell in love with them. I would reread them, and I found out later that's not normal. I found out later that most kids don't read Beowulf and the Odyssey, whatever. But around the age 13 or 14, I had kind of run out of those books to read, because this is pre-Google, so I couldn't just Google and get a whole list of 50,000 books like that. And so I was looking for something in that vein, and that's what I found. Comic books, but they were doing it, but not quite. And then I found John Gardner's Grendel, which is, for those who don't know, it's the story of Beowulf from the monster's point of view. And it's really a deconstruction of villainy and of monsters and like all these things that we create to kind of be the bad guys. And it really just, it's an amazing, illuminating book. Probably, to me, one of the best books ever. But what it did, and I think every writer needs this, it gave me permission to write. Because I found out, I didn't know that writers were allowed to take pre-existing stories and to redevelop them and to do things different with them. And so I started writing like short stories about the Odyssey, like alternate versions of the Odyssey, and little characters that showed up for like one page in the Odyssey. I would like write a backstory for them. So it was that book that gave me permission to write. And then from that point forward, I would write fiction and just kind of play with it. I discovered poetry in like my mid-20s to meet women. I would rarely admit that. And for the record, like getting a graduate degree in poetry to meet women is the most expensive way to do it. But it's so that's kind of how I got into writing. John Gardner's Grendel, and then William Golding's Lord of the Flies had a dramatic influence as well. So those are two books that kind of guided my career. Next question.
How do you like the cover?
I love the
What does
cover.
it mean to you?
Oh, I love it because it's got the inverted, something's just kind of off. Like it seems if it looks very vivid and very realistic, but it's completely off. Obviously, because the kid's upside down. So I love the cover. I think they did a wonderful job on it. And I found out it was an internal competition at Harlequin because they wanted to launch one cover for like a global release, which they had never done before. Typically, a book would have a U.S. cover, a UK cover, an Australia cover, a Denmark cover, all that kind of good stuff. And they wanted to do one unified cover. And so they had a competition inside like Harlequin International, like all these different countries. And there were like 30-some submissions for people trying to submit the cover. And this one was the one that actually wound up being the cover. And they totally nailed it. So this cover is in all these different countries now, but I love it. I completely love it. I always get asked, like people will always take the book and like turn it upside down and like turn the front, they do that over and over again. But yeah, I totally love the cover.
It's like crystal coming down, falling out of heaven.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Dropping out of heaven.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a fantastic cover.
Thanks. Yeah, I love it too. I wish I could say I did something on it, but I didn't. They totally did it. They did everything on it. They did a great job. Cool. Yes, sir.
Yeah, one of the characters in your book, I haven't read the entire book, but one of the characters in your book by the name of Fred Green, was that coincidental?
Well, Fred Green is actually based off of a gentleman, well, loosely based off, the name is kind of based off of a gentleman in my town. I come from a really small town in North Carolina. There's a Green family. I went to a couple of my classmates were twins, or I think was Green. Their father's name was Fred Green. So I kind of borrowed that for the project.
Yes, I know them.
Oh, you know them?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, I'm
Where are you
the
from?
town. I'm from the town.
You're from Bolton?
Yeah.
Yeah, to give context as to why I'm so shocked right now, because this gentleman will tell you Bolton
I want
has,
to wait to the end.
Bolton has maybe 700 people. We've got like one caution light, no stoplights. It's that kind of a town. So to be in San Francisco and to meet a gentleman from Bolton is pretty dramatic. Okay, cool. Yeah. So
You
Fred Green.
probably know my children, Carlin and Kenji Bowen.
Yeah. This is so surreal. Yeah, I do know them. Yeah, it's pretty awesome. That's outstanding. So yeah.
So how did you did you read about Jason's book?
Yeah, I'm on Facebook and keep up with my family life in North Carolina.
Great.
I live in Fairfield, and I'm a private educator in Fairfield. And so I heard about it and you know, I came.
Well, that's terrific. Thanks for coming out. It's terrific.
Yeah.
Hometown. That's awesome.
So is your hometown a little bit like Arcadia?
Yeah, it is. There's a town nearby called East Arcadia, as this gentleman here I'm sure knows. And my mother was born and raised there. So I wanted to kind of pay an homage to her a little bit. So I used the name of Arcadia. The fictional Arcadia is essentially a combining of 3 different towns in my area. It's a town called Bolton, it's a town called East Arcadia, it's a town called Whiteville. So I just took all 3 of them and kind of squished them together and made the town of Arcadia here. And I found out later, this is another like weird, unexpected side effect of all this good stuff. So the novel takes place in Arcadia, North Carolina. The television series will take place in Arcadia, Missouri. Don't ask me why they changed it to Missouri. No idea. The writer, Aaron Zellman, decided to do that. Whatever. But there is a real Arcadia, Missouri, who I found out later. Who, when they found out about it, they were like, "Oh, it's totally cool. We gotta get behind it." So I started getting emails from this entire town, Missouri, asking why I chose their town as the setting of my book. And I was like, I have no idea your town even existed. And so, but it's become really interesting because they're huge fans of the book. They got on board with the book. Now they're getting on board with the television show. And they're trying to do like an actual screening of it there. So it was a complete unexpected side effect. This real town of Arcadia, Missouri exists, and they're all huge fans of the book and fans of the show now. So it's just weird stuff like that happens. Cool. Any other questions? Back.
I have a lot of authors coming here and citing the classic like inspirations. Do you have a favorite contemporary author you cite?
Neil Gaiman. Like I totally admire Neil Gaiman just dramatically. Not only his imagination and his writing skill, but mostly his imagination. He's got an amazing just thought, how he creates things. But also his diversity. Neil Gaiman can write in any format and just excel at it, and that's something I deeply admire. He writes for television, he writes for movies, he writes children's books, he writes fiction, he writes speeches and they go viral, and he puts a book out, he wrote a good speech. Neil Gaiman is absolutely amazing to me. Cormac McCarthy is another huge influence. He's much over that darker, more violent kind of writing, but it's really illuminating and very good stuff. Karen Thompson Walker, Age of Miracles, I love that book. Let's see who else. There's a few other poets, Brian Dietrich, Virginia Holgate, and things like that. But yeah, Neil Gaiman is probably one of my biggest fans. I'm the biggest fan of him right now.
Do you have a favorite book by Neil Gaiman? Or
American
so
Gods.
many.
American Gods I loved.
Yeah.
I think that when Neil Gaiman writes, he writes about mythology. And I think people, a lot of times it's hard to see like how he's writing about mythology, but he really is he knows a lot about mythology. And there's a historian named Joseph Campbell who wrote extensively on mythology and folklore and things of that manner. Probably the greatest in human history to ever write about it. And Neil Gaiman is obviously, when you read his work, he's very well read and very influenced by Joseph Campbell, he influenced me as well. So I love reading Gaiman's work and seeing those influences kind of appear in his writing. That's why I'm probably a big fan of his as well. So yeah.
Would you say you're following your bliss?
Yes.
As Joseph Campbell.
Exactly. Definitely following my bliss.
That's great. Any other questions? Because I know Jason would love to sign books, which we have at our
Always fun.
registers.
Yes.
And
Always good.
Yeah. So.
Any other questions at all?
Have you thought of writing children's books?
That actually has been broached. I did not expect that as well. I got an email, my agent probably won't tell anybody this, but I did get an email from a publisher asking what I would like to do with a children's book. And I've actually become very obsessed with the idea of doing it now. So I think that may be something that happens actually, strangely enough. I've got nieces and nephews who have been pretty big parts of their lives. And also, I think that it would be fun to do because I grew up reading, like I said, these huge epic tales. And I've always wanted to pass that on somehow, kind of give that back in a certain way. And I think that children's books are the way to do that. So I think maybe something that I do kind of fall into. It's amazing that you asked that though, like, because when I got the email, I was like, children's books, like, it's just completely blindsided by it. And I was like, yeah, maybe. So yeah, we'll see.
Mythology.
Yeah, exactly. Lots of mythology. Crazy uncles that show up and do stuff. That's kind of what I do. I can see a series about the crazy uncle that shows up and does stuff. Yeah, I've got a niece she's 7 years old now, and the things she says about me, and we still haven't figured out exactly what it means. But apparently, I'm part lion. Like she's like, oh, Uncle Jason's part lion, and that's kind of how she explains whatever she's explaining. We don't know what it means exactly, but I like it, so it is what it is.
Nice. Cool.
Anybody else? All right, well, cool. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, Jason.